max full volume. Hard computer or the internet. There are too many options. What I am going to do is quickly go over the data first, because then I can at least too many options. What I am going to do is quickly go over the data first, because then I can at least close that window, and then maybe have an improvement. Close that window, and then maybe have an improvement. God, I can see nothing's loading. Actually, I need to get somebody on here to check. Yeah, so I've asked in the group for somebody to come on and check this is okay, because at the moment it's really not looking okay. And then we'll see. Even my second screen is completely lagged, so I can't even tell if you can hear me properly or anything like that. But I certainly don't want to do a 2-hour stream and be unable to be heard. This computer has been a lot better, but today apparently not. Now it says no data. I definitely don't want to do a full stream if there's no data. I think it's the internet. I can see my message on Telegram isn't even going through. I haven't got time for this. I might just record a video. If anyone's there, can you... Oh, I can see one view. Whoever you are, the one viewer, please can you send me a message and let me know if you can actually hear what I'm saying, or if I'm just talking to myself. Oh, we're now back onto excellent connection. It's so bizarre, it makes no sense. So I wondered, maybe I've got internet issues today and I need to just try again another day. Okay, let me start, and then if someone comes on, then they can tell me whether it's all okay. Yeah, so if anyone joins from now and sees this, because you see a bit of a lag when I'm talking, please let me know if there's anything wrong. Okay, so yeah, I'll start on the data anyway, like I said at the beginning, because then at least I can close this window and hopefully get a bit more bandwidth back. ETFs, Bitcoin's it did have some buying yesterday, and has had just off BlackRock. Everybody else is pretty flat, so not much to report there. Ether has had some selling over the last 4 or 5 days, last week and this week. Yeah, then a bit of selling actually yesterday from BlackRock, which is unusual. Okay, I'm told the stream is good, so hopefully we're good. Oh, stuttered then stopped. No, I've got 2. Hold on, let me find out. Maybe I should just shut down the vertical stream and just do one stream and shut down Twitch. Shut down Twitch. See if that improves the situation if I shut down Twitch. I hear you and I'm vertical. Yeah, you can hear me. Okay. All right. Thank you. Oh, I sent that on Twitch. Didn't send that on Twitch. Thank you. I can just say it, although I'm writing it as well. Anyway, okay, good. Glad you can hear me. I'm still getting errors, but so long as it doesn't, like when I've had errors, part of why my worry is the errors I've had before are what happens is I then listen back to it and the voice is completely out of line with what I'm actually looking at on the charts, which is obviously not ideal. Anyway, I'll start again with what I was saying before, since if you're hearing me okay. Sound is all right, but screen is vertical. Yeah, that's not. I've got a vertical stream and a horizontal stream, so you can look at either. But you've obviously got the link for the vertical one. But if you look at the horizontal one, I don't know if I can share. Let me see if I can share the link. Should be in landscape. Yeah, there are 2. Hold on. Try this link. And see if you get the other one. And then at least you can tell me if I'm all right on horizontal as well. Yeah, okay, so I'll go back to what I was saying before anyway, so just look at the data quickly first. Bitcoin and ETF data is pretty flat, and there's a bit of buying yesterday going on from BlackRock, which is has died off recently. There's some selling, and so it's picked up the buying again, which is interesting, but obviously we need to see some continuation on that. Ether, on the other hand, it was selling yesterday, and then but a little bit of buying from the others. So again, yeah, just pretty flat and pretty like what's the word? Nothing conclusive either way. On that, and Solana, just while we're here, a look at that. There was some buying on that actually at the end of last week, but now that's gone to zero. So on the data, in fact, there actually isn't much to say, but yeah, that's why I thought I could just run it quickly and then go on to what the charts are actually saying. So walls-wise, there's nothing of note close to price, and I've said that previously. I've said that when we were at the top, actually, we had very few walls on the way down, although obviously some came in later. 105k and 100k, not surprisingly, on both Binance and Coinbase. Ether has a wall at current price on Binance, but again, just sort of walls scattered throughout, but nothing really of a significance. The only thing of significance on the Ether, actually, so Ether slightly front ran the entry that I wanted last night at the highs, but there was a wall slightly below, and just to be somewhat awkward, it took out Monday high here to the left, but didn't take out what I wanted is for it to take out the highs of the whole consolidation from the last week of August, or the last day of August, I think that is. So it didn't go and take everything out, unfortunately. And thus, so I don't know if anybody got in the short entry or not, but slightly front ran. And now I've also got an entry for a long here, which was a bit slightly dubious on that as well, because again, this low that we had on the 2nd of August, I wanted to take out those wicks. So I still think there are signs this can go lower, but obviously we're just trying to get scalps in the interim as well. So, yeah, so not much really important in the way of walls, I guess. If I was looking lower time frame, I'd probably need to be more cognizant of that. On the liquidations front, so up to a higher time frame on this. Some liquidations actually just below where we are at now on Bitcoin, and then at the 108k level, taking out the low from, when was that, second, a couple of days ago. And then obviously above the high. So again, nothing really that isn't blindingly obvious to report, just under the levels you expect the liquidations to be under. Trying to think if there was anything else. Yeah, and again, I did look at I don't know if this is going to load because this is always a bit challenging. I did look at the OI and things like that, but again, from a lower time frame perspective, load up CoinGlass instead. From a lower time frame perspective, this is not overly useful. I'm actually on the 4-hour chart here on the left, but you can see obviously the high time frame, the longs are still very much in. Some have been knocked out, but there's a significant amount that went in on that last pump on the 10th of July, up from 110k to where we are now. And so again, nothing that's really helpful at the moment. And I mean, normally I would look at OI and longs and shorts on the lower time frames. Would I long Ether now? I don't know. Hold on a sec. I'll get to the charts. It depends on your time frame, really, with the answering that question anyway. But yeah, just to finish on this, so I'm using these two, the upper net longs and net shorts more than the lower two. These are called new, but I haven't investigated what they actually are, and they're not overly useful because we've just got shorts going up excessively, and longs coming down excessively. But these old ones, I guess, are more closely aligned with EXO charts. So that's kind of what I've been using here. But as you can see, it's pretty much sideways. And normally what we're looking for is for OI to be pushing on the lower time frames. Let's go down to the hourly on this. And then when we're reaching a bottom or a top, we want to see OI spike in the wrong direction. I think I actually did see that on EXO. Yeah. So for example, now where we're at on Bitcoin, if this was to be a bottom, if this was a zone that I was interested in, which it is dubiously is, but it's not a good zone. So this isn't particularly somewhere I would want to long Bitcoin, which in contrast of where you want to, whether you want to long Ether is a bit more dubious because Bitcoin isn't ideal. But what you want to see is like shorts going in at the bottom here. And ideally, you don't really want to see longs going in because you want the longs to have been stopped out and people starting to short the bottom in inverted commas. So we're seeing a little bit of that on Binance futures here, but not loads at the moment. But even then, having said that, when I look back, I mean, I just don't know how useful OI is at the moment. And the other thing that crossed my mind, you can see that notification. I turned off my notifications, but for some reason that one keeps coming up to connect to a Bluetooth that I have never connected to and never want to connect to. Anyway, so there's not much more on the data. So let's just go on to the charts. Close that, I think, and hopefully free up some bandwidth. So Ether, Urban, you were asking about. So obviously I had this long alert here, which you would have got in the group for 8-hour demand. But like I say, the difficulty is like when I'm looking at these low time frame entries, like I want a decent zone, B, really for Ether, you want confluence with Bitcoin and with all the other charts. Bitcoin is arguably, it's in a 3-minute zone here. That's the pink that we've got. It's also on this previous, I think that's an 8 or 12-hour level, 8-hour level. So yeah, Bitcoin's in a place where you might want to bounce, but it's not one that I was really looking for, and obviously one I hadn't alerted. You can see now we've made a 4-hour supply in there as well. The difficulty with Bitcoin and Ether at the moment, let's go to the bigger Bitcoin chart. So it's the question is, are we seeing this bigger reversal? And it's the same with all the majors. So XRP, BONK, you're asking me about XRP. It's much the same. So all the majors, including Bitcoin and Ether, have these sort of challenging structures where we've got a major demand that we're hitting at the lows. In the case of the majors, most of these have hit 2 or 3 times already, so they're even more dubious. Bitcoin, at least, it sort of came down, it bounced off the first, my aggressive 4-day alert that I had there. Didn't manage to get very far, came back down and has hit the next one. I actually wanted this slightly lower again, taking out the wick from the start of July, which is fully taking out this consolidation. So again, it bounced slightly higher than I would have wanted there anyway. But again, it's still in a downtrend. So all of these majors are still, well, that's green, but they're still trending down, and we've now got a lower high. So let's go on to that. So what you're looking for when you're looking for the reversal in the bigger picture, you just connected to me. Cool. Welcome. Yeah, so what you're looking for in the bigger picture is for a break of a previous high in this downtrend. So we want a break of this level, and I actually have a short alert there anyway, but a break of that level, then new demand, and then you're looking for the higher low. Now, those for the moment. That doesn't mean this is not going to bounce in here. That black back again. That doesn't mean we're not going to bounce in here, and we can't, and we're not going to start the uptrend. But the risk is obviously is that what this demand hasn't done is it hasn't proven it's strong enough to break the sellers. So these are buyers in here. It's a demand zone. We got the first bounce off it. When was that? 2 days ago, I think, on Tuesday. But it's been unable to break the sellers above, and this is a 3-day supply. So again, on all the majors, what we have is a whole mess of supply above, and like Bitcoin's actually not as bad. I'll get onto the majors in a bit, but it's now got 2 weeks supply in here. And what that marks is 2 week, and change that to a 2 week. So this is a 2 weeks supply, the big blue zone. Then there's nothing on the 5-day. Nothing on the 4-day, but a lot of the majors have a lot of 5-day and 4 days, all three here as well. Bitcoin has got it made a 3-day supply. It came down, it bounced up, rejected it, came down lower, made a new 3-day supply. So again, it's now rejecting off 3-day supply. You think it's a bull year? What, 2025 or 2026? Because we're kind of 3/4 of the way through the year now, nearly. So buy the dip. Yeah, everyone says buy the dip. I find that I actually heard somebody say buy the dip earlier in one of my other groups, and I kind of laugh because, like, what does buy the dip? I don't know. It's not words I would ever use. But what does buy the dip mean? Because so I've kind of been thinking more about the zones below that I'd be interested in. But buy the dip for me on the monthly means 93k or possibly down to 85k, and these are obviously zones, so it could mean this whole area from 73 to 95k. So that's buy the dip. Then obviously you've got buy the dip on the lower time frames. If you buy now, for example, that's still a dip. Or you can say, you know, we're in this giant uptrend. Where is buy the dip? Is buy the dip, you know, this is still an uptrend. Buy the dip is still here. 17k. Buy knows how high. You're being, I wonder if that's you, A, from the group, because these seems like for the kind of comments that you make. Anyway, yeah, so to me, I don't know what buy the dip means. For a futures trader, what ritual do I take before entering the trade? I don't really have a ritual. What do you mean ritual? do you mean like sort of lighting a cigarette? I probably light a cigarette, that would be my ritual. Or do you mean a ritual from a TA perspective? Like, I mean, you've seen, like, you've seen like all my comments in the group anyway that you're looking for, that I'm looking for. So what's the bigger structure? So in the case of this, for example, I already talked about the monthly down here. You know, this is your uptrend. Within that, we've got waves. So until this low is broken, we're not in a downtrend on that time frame. The difficulty then is you then come straight into monthly demand. So then potentially you can still do that from there. So but what I'm doing when I was talking about rituals, I'm looking at all the time frames, and that's why I have all my crazy colors and all my mess all over the charts, because I'm kind of going, okay, what trend are we in on what time frame? So at the moment we're in a downtrend on the 3-day, plus we've got a 2-week supply above. You never really know, they could rug pull any time. They can, I don't know. So I also don't never talk about they, but yes, we could get rug pulled at any time, but I don't talk about a mythical they. My concerns actually on the rug pulling front are kind of really what's happening with the indices at the moment. Excuse me, just having my protein. But yeah, so anyway, so we're in this kind of downtrend on the 3-day, but we're coming into the start of this last up move. And like I say, that stretches from all the way down here. This is your last up move, and this is basically your larger range. So from the last pump up to here. So we have to break that low to be in a downtrend on this time frame. So yes, you're looking for longs in this area, but you're looking for one of the 3-day supplies in this case, because there are 3 days to break. So really you wanted this to come up into here, that higher low, and then you look for a push perhaps into the 120k area. But for now, we haven't even managed to make that higher high here. So one of the other issues I have, just going back over here, so if you've watched my last stream or previous streams, you'll know that I've kind of seen similarities in the most recent structure we've had with this area in 2021. Again, just a quick recap, but you can go and watch the previous streams for the detail. But back in 2021, well, firstly, we had a high hit on the US dollar pair, and we didn't on Korea, and then we came back for a second move that took out all-time high on the Korean pair. The same has happened here. It's more, let me take my drawings off for a minute. The same has happened here. Look, it's overextended, but this first high here where the US dollar pair took out all-time high, then we had Korea come up on the second run, and that took out all-time high as well. So there's that similarity. We've got Microstrategy. Have a look at that. I haven't looked at that for a couple of days. So Microstrategy is also showing similarities with the 2021 top, which is also concerning. And obviously we don't have to do the same thing, and the structures in some cases are different. But if we look at so Microstrategy, what I don't like is it kind of tried to make a monthly demand there, but then came back with a strong candle close below, making a new monthly supply. It does have a 3-monthly demand here, so this could still also hold and push. It's a weak demand, but we just need to see the reaction. So it's not all doom and gloom yet. But when I look at the lower time frames and I see how this top is playing out, potential top is playing out in contrast with this top, that's also another kind of driver for, is this the same as back in 2021? Okay, back to the normal Bitcoin chart. So like I said, this is overextended, but also if you look at, I mean, you can see it here on the 2-week chart as well, the way this bottom was formed, comes up, makes a wave, which possibly should have been a lower high, or at this point actually should have been a lower high. This is then an extended B wave, took out the high before dropping back down. similarly here, this is kind of made, this took out the high already in this case, but then if you look at the career chart, it's quite similar. Again, should that have been the actual high? This has been another push. And are we going to get a drop now? You can see we've now got a 2-week supply in there that I talked about a minute ago. And then also, again, if you look at the lower time frame structures, the similarity of this middle wave then also makes me slightly nervous, like it's not a strong demand. So I just don't know if it's going to hold. And back here, the major difference back here is obviously we had a lot more volatility. This came down a lot harder, but we could still be building up, and it may be this week that it would happen, if it's going to happen, particularly because we've got NFP tomorrow. You hope we pump. Everybody always hopes we pump. I don't really care if we pump or dump because we're just trading in both directions. In fact, I do care. I lie. I actually hope we dump because I trade bear markets much better than bull markets. And I find shorts much easier to see than longs. Or longs, I tend to struggle. And I don't know if it could be a crypto thing, because so if I look at this and you said to me, where do I long? There are so many zones, and you can see, take my drawings back. There are so many zones. What Bitcoin does when it goes up is it doesn't retest. When it comes down, it doesn't always retest. It didn't here, but it's much more likely to retest, which is why I find shorts easier. But crypto as well, in general, when it goes up, it tends to just run, and you get no opportunities to jump in on retests unless you jump in on like a 15-minute or an hourly chart. Which you need to really obviously be monitoring if you're doing that. But the problem we've got here, you can see all the crosses that I've got going down, is, it had a weekly zone here, or a 3-weekly zone, I think, that wasn't quite tested with this low. Then, we ran up pretty fast. We came back, we retraced here, but again, didn't hit this yearly level, didn't hit the 3-weekly level also in there. There's a 3-month down here that hasn't been tested. So the problem I tend to have with longs is that it couldn't, and if it wants to, it can eventually come all the way back down here. Obviously, it probably will at some point. Whether it's immediate now, I don't know, or whether it does it in one giant candle or a bigger move like this, or more slowly, is another matter. So, if you've watched my previous streams, you'll know that I'm just kind of saying that some of these zones aren't necessarily the highest probability. I circled these more immediate zones. Also, there's 3-month zone. Obviously, you want to watch the top of that. If we just take out those wicks there. These are the ones that I would hopefully be more confident of. And if we started breaking this zone, then I'd be a lot more bearish. But what we can do is so through all these sort of interim zones that I've got here, I changed all my black crosses to green actually. And then because it's easier to see, obviously green long and red short. However, then I want to highlight the ones I'm more confident of. So I left these black anyway. So there's no real distinction between black and green. Obviously, if they're below the price, they're a long. But what I've said before is, again, that, are we going to get bounces on each of these zones? So the first two we have, are we going to just get this, in which case, or maybe bigger retracements, in which case then all these zones are potentially valid. If we come up and test into this 2-week supply, then because it's actually a bit higher, but that's the start of the 2-week, or if we get all the way up to higher inside it, then I might be less inclined to look for longs on these types of zones, because 2-week supply is a much higher time frame. But at the moment, we're still looking at, are we going to pick up? So it's already in 2-week demand at the top here. Then we've got a 3-week at the next level. There is a 3-week demand. And there's also an untested 8-hour at the bottom if it wants to retrace some of this up move here. So again, at the moment we're looking at 3-week demand. Is this going to hold? And is it going to be strong enough to push back through that 2-week supply? So at the moment, yes, I'm still bullish. Yes, buy the dip, if whatever you consider to be a dip. But I'm cautiously bullish because of those similarities of 2021, and also with this, particularly now we've got this 2-week supply in here, and that 2-week is mirrored on, I think, CME has a 2-week, Korea has a weekly, so it's a bit higher, I think, relatively than the 2-week. And now we've got 2-weekly demand on US dollar dominance. Yes, what goes up must come down, except for gold. But even eventually that will come down. Well, must come down eventually. But the problem is, as a futures trader, as Obina just asked, what ritual do I have before entering a trade? I don't know. I didn't fully answer that question because I'm not sure. You need to clarify what you mean, Obina, with what ritual do I have other than lighting a cigarette. So anyway, where we're at now, as I say, we're still in a downtrend on Bitcoin. Still in a downtrend on the 3-day, but we are coming into 2-week, 3-week demand. So we're looking for, are we eventually going to get some sort of reaction that's going to push through? So now we've hit this zone. This is still possible short entry, and then that 120k level is where a lot of the liquidations are at. But those, obviously need to be slightly wary of short. And now we've hit the demand. Like in a perfect world, we would have retested these zones before coming down into the demand. Okay, so lights of smoke. Why has there been a laughing about my cigarette comment? I'm about to light one as well. But I'm not taking a trade. It's just the stress of having to stream and possibly getting you all you guys wrecked. Kidding. Mostly I don't get you wrecked. I think generally I've got a reasonable success rate, but it's obviously how you trade them. These shorts, obviously, we eventually went and took out the high, but they all gave reactions. And this is what I always say. It's like, well, you've got zones. Chances are they're going to give you a reaction. So assuming you trade a zone, you put your stop above the zone and you move your stop to break even once you're getting the direction you want, then even if you're the wrong direction in this case, or if you're too aggressive, this was a weekly supply, which is why I was looking more aggressively for shorts. And also in the hope that we'd come down into here before doing this fuckery in the middle. But at least then, once you're trading a zone, you've got a defined stop. You quit smoking. Very sensible. I need to quit smoking because basically I can't breathe anymore. But I have my actual cigarettes and I have this. You can't see. There you go. Sorry, my background remover is holding over the background. I have this, which my friend told me looks like a cigar. But basically it's a vape without vape. So it's basically a piece of wood, a very expensive piece of wood. And you put these, you can see in the end, there's like a filter. You put these flavored filters in. So basically it's like there's no vape. It's like breathing minty air. This one is mint, but you can get there's a whole variety of flavors. It cost me like 50 euros. I was thinking it's the most expensive piece of wood in the world. Should have gone into a forest and carved one myself. But frankly, I spend so much on smoking. Just like I explained, what things do I consider before opening a position? Okay. Yeah, so what I was saying, it's like what I was saying in the group the last couple of days. So I'm going, right, the main thing to consider is, are we in a zone of interest? So now on Bitcoin, we are in a giant 2-week zone. So the first thing is, yes, you are in a zone that you want to potentially look for longs. Your invalidation for that zone is below this wick. So obviously in this case, you can enter long now. And you'll stop all the way down here with a target of 300,000 or something and have that reasonable risk to reward. It just depends on the time frame, what kind of a time frame trader you are. Like, are you an investor? Obviously, I don't typically recommend that approach because we're not investors for the most part. We are traders. I can't smoke joints anymore. I try. I'm not a big joint smoker anyway, but like now, basically, I choke to death if I smoke a joint. So, and also joints just do. I have the amount of people I've seen screwed up by smoking weed is unreal. So I'm very, very anti. Like I think to smoke a joint every once in a while, fine. But anyone who smokes a joint on a regular basis will argue with me that they're absolutely fine and they're operating the best they can, but my personal experience, all the people I've seen do it are nowhere near as productive and good as they would have been, motivated, all those things when they're smoking weed. So I'm very, very anti on being a regular smoker of that. But having said that, even if I did smoke a joint, which I have tried like about a year ago, I basically choked to death. It killed my lungs. So for example, I think my lungs can deal with this. But my lungs, for whatever, like they kicked off a massive fuss to weed, and they don't particularly like vapes, like real vapes either. So I can't even. I think I'm so attuned to having smoked these for thousands of years that anything else I do, my lungs are like, this is not the air you normally smoke, in inverted commas. Anyway, so yeah, back to what you were saying. So this is a 2-week demand. So then I'm looking at the zones inside it. Then I'm kind of going, as I said, we had the bounce potentially off the top. Then we had a daily in here taking out these wicks below. Then we have a 3-week in here, and then we've got this 8-hour down the bottom. So again, like if you're an investor, then you can go, okay, you put an entry there, you put an entry there, you put an entry here, you put an entry here, and your stop's down here and you DCA it in. So that's the other approach to doing it. Then you end up, hopefully if it comes all the way down here, you end up with a decent average. If it doesn't, if it kind of bounces halfway, then at least you're in. Then you can move your stop up when you see the bounce happen, etc., etc. So that's your other kind of approach. for me, what I'm doing is I'm kind of going, okay, this is the first zone I'm interested in. And you'll see with the alerts that I put on alts in the channel, that when the first one hits, I just move the alert down or up to the next zone inside the bigger zone. So sometimes, we'll get a giant red candle that just runs through everything, or green. And other times you'll see these bounces on each of the zones. And every time I'm looking at, so I map all the zones, but the other big thing is to go, what is your actual structure in your waves? And you can use, I haven't and I don't, but, potentially you could use this, a line chart, if that makes it easier for you to not see candles. So then you're literally, and then it becomes obviously much clearer that you've got a wave down, it retraces, you've got a wave down, it retraces, a wave down, it retraces. So if it comes up and breaks that high, this is your first supply of interest for still continuation shorts, which is what you see playing out now. Or if it comes up and breaks that, then you're looking for a long on the retest. And that's the sort of simplest thing. So when I have my ritual, as you say, I do it with candles. I don't do it with the line chart, but I'm going, what are the waves down? Where do I need to see break? And on top of that, and like I say, it doesn't mean you don't have to enter. You don't enter longs early if you want to do that, but just know what you're doing. So as I said, we have this daily demand in here, which you'll see on the lower time frame chart. This wick was where I had the alert on Tuesday. So we had a daily demand. Part of the reason I did that is because I thought we had space to actually go up to the top of this wave, and we're on 3-week demand at the low. But the risk here is this could have just rejected this 3-day supply and it could just run straight back through from there. In this case, to some extent, we got lucky, but I think I don't know. I'm pretty sure in the alert, or at least in my commentary when we talk about it in the Telegram channel, I'm putting obviously be wary of that because we're not as yet in an uptrend. And even now, so even any longs now, so you want to long in here, feel free. But no, we are not in an uptrend yet. It is possible we bounce here and go and start creating said uptrend. But at the moment, we haven't done that. Then similarly, you can do exactly the same things on the lower time frame. So now, what are we on at the moment on the 4-hour? But so again, I have all my zones drawn in. So then we look at this most recent wave if you want to get the early entry. So that's your most recent down move. With that again. Then you look at the waves inside that. And you can see we're consolidating here. That's your first risk area, which is where we got the move down off it. So again, you could say, okay, now we've broken this area. The lower the time frame, the more complex it becomes, because obviously once you break one area, then you expect to go up into the next area. So all you're looking at is the bouncing. Just try and think of everything as like waves and then bouncing between supply and demand. And sometimes you get crazy stuff. And so this is the stuff I don't like. I mean, it's nice, obviously, if it goes into a zone that I've had alerted previously. But these candles are fewer and further between, but are obviously harder because this is, there was a supply there. There might have been a bigger supply here, and it's just run straight through them. In this case, obviously that wick had come quite close to testing there, so then maybe that one was a more predictable one. But those are the ones, obviously, that are more challenging. When something just runs, it runs. And again, that's why you wait for your zone, and you wait for the reaction on some lower time frame in the zone. So here, for example, once you're coming in to the zone of interest, one of the things a lot of people do is they obviously wait for the low to be taken out. And a lot of people just do that in isolation. But for me, what I want is for this to come up, to test the first supply. So those are your first sellers to be concerned with. Then it's come down off there. Unfortunately, in this case, it didn't get high enough, but that would be a perfect world that this wick could come into your supply there. Then it comes down, and if it doesn't break the low by any significant amount or makes a higher low, what it's telling you is those sellers are weak. What you expect of those sellers at this point is for it to go further. And in this case, it didn't. So then you kind of go, okay, the selling so far in this zone is weak. So if it comes back to test that, then maybe it's going to go through it. And, in this case, it's a bit choppy and it took some time to do that, but that's kind of what you're looking for. Then in conjunction with that, I'm also looking at the major zones, because sort of in situations like this, and I actually think I saw some people in the group, or not in our group, in other groups, like, so here, when we had this big pump, we made a daily demand here underneath it. So a lot of people would have wanted to long again in that zone. But again, the problem we have here is, yes, it made a daily demand, but it went straight up into daily supply. So again, that's why you need to be kind of aware of all the zones. And, you know, my charts may look crazy, but at least I know what I'm trading from. But in a situation like this, you're going, you know, if you'd wanted to long here, if you'd thought, okay, that's the low, this is the swing fail of the low, we've had a good reaction off there, okay, it's coming to a daily supply, but I think it might make a higher low here. You're then going, okay, just draw a zone. You're going, okay, this is your zone. And you're going down to 8 hour, 4 hour, etc. And in this case, you know, it just ran straight through it. So if you put a limit order here, then obviously that would have failed. But what I would suggest that you do, and if you're a trader, again, more than an investor, because this is the lower time frames, even if it's a daily, you're going, okay, I'm waiting for the reaction in here. And in this case, you know, obviously it just ran straight through it. So you would never have taken a trade and never would have been stopped out. And similarly now, if you're saying, okay, this is the consolidation here, it's not a clear demand, which is, like I say, I haven't put an entry on this. Getting errors on my stream again, which is not ideal. Yeah, if you're saying, okay, you want to long in this demand, and it's not a good demand, like I just said, you're short from 110 to 450. Okay, decent. I assume you're a low time frame trader then. What's your target? Yeah, so this isn't a very clean demand, but if you are looking for longs in here, then you're waiting, you've got to wait for it to come into the zone. It's right on the top of the zone now, and then you're going, okay, what's your low time frame? So down to this, I'm looking then at very, very low time frame. So I'm then kind of going 15 minutes. So in this case, and this is why you see my detailed chart, I'm going, okay, we've got a 15-minute supply here. So got a bit of chop in here. Maybe you can argue it's going to make it, but if it made a new demand in here, then you could potentially start looking for long, similar to here. So in this case, we're looking at, read my comments. When you say wait for reaction, do I make a 4-hour close or daily close? No, not. I don't really care about closes. I'm waiting for structure to break. So like, let's say here you have a downtrend on a 15-minute chart. So you're waiting for that first move up that breaks a high. And again, this is very choppy. Like ideally, some are going to be cleaner than others. 10,000, 103,500. Okay, so you're quite bearish then. That's aggressive. Yeah, so you're waiting for structure to break. And then you say, okay, it's got new demand, and you can look for longs on that new demand. So, and you see in this case, again, if you'd waited for that, you would have got a decent scalp entry, but then once you've seen that 2 or 3 times, it's not going to go higher, you know, depending on where your target is. I mean, and then arguably your target is the next 15-minute supply up here. I'm not sure if that wick slightly hit that or not. But again, you're looking at, okay, it's going from the first demand, it's making a structure, it's broken the first high, where's the next high? Okay, it's broken that high, where's the next high? And really that's where you should be taking profit. Like I said, the 15 minutes is a bit too low for that to make it very clear. And the same here, you know, we've come down, we've got a 15-minute supply, we've come down. So you could wait for that level to be taken out. That's ideally what you want. That gets taken out. Then you've made new demand here. Most people, unfortunately, just don't have the patience for this. And you've got to come back to the charts and have a proper look at them. Particularly when you're hitting things like 3-weekly zones. I mean, you can see we're on the 2-week demand now in the bigger picture on Bitcoin. And it takes obviously days, 3-day charts. You know, you're looking for daily, 2-day, 3-day. And I generally say for what the alerts that I give, you know, you should be looking for 8 and 12-hour reversals. And that saves you going into all this chop. But again, you are quite often get a strong reaction off the level. So it's like, there are so many different ways to trade. It makes it hard, but this is essentially how I'm doing it. So ideally you want this to break that level, then it comes back into here, and then you look for a long entry for the next wave. And then that next wave, you ideally would want it to break this supply because you've already had a first test on it, but then you're just waiting for it to get up to the next major supply. That should be where you then take profit. You know, if it runs a green candle through everything, then great, but really your take profit should be at the next swing high, if you're trading low time frames. But every chart is really different. Like it's like it's not easy. I mean, you can even if you look at this, you know, you've got a big bounce off here, which it then retraces all the way to the start of the impulse before then bouncing again. Then here it makes a higher low. But again, it doesn't come all the way back to the start of the impulse. And here is again a strong move up. But then we start chopping. That's the other thing I tend to look for, is what the momentum's looking like. And then there are things like that which can dramatically change if it wants. But I do try and look at momentum. So here you can see we've got strong momentum, and then the momentum really dies before we end up rolling over. I just want to I'll show you a contrasting chart to that, because momentum can be not the best. Let's go on the alts quickly. This notification about my Bluetooth is really annoying me. So take was the one, I think. So this was an annoying front runner. I had an alert. So if we ignore the giant green candle coming off that, I think, to be honest, I think this was because it was listed on Binance. So it's not necessarily a really good judge of how PA normally works. But so I had an alert in here, which I've now deleted, which obviously you can see those candles, like it didn't quite get down to into that zone to test. But what I'd actually written in the alert was that I was unsure because momentum was dying, because obviously we have a big move here, and you can see how it's getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And then I was like, not sure about this. Is it going to actually take off from there, or is it just going to roll over? So I put a comment in the alert saying I'm not sure because the momentum's dying on this. And obviously you can see how that turned out. This is looking quite nice, actually. If anyone wants to scalp this, it's just come off the 8 hour. If Bitcoin's bouncing now, that might be a decent scalp with a nice defined stop underneath that 8 hour anyway. The disclaimer that Binance listings, I don't necessarily know if it's going to continue. Sorry, Rules Crypto, what are you saying? 103,500, it's only 1.01 BTC. I'm just waiting if you can see from along from there. Yeah, that's fine. But on the targets, like I say, it just depends what structures you're trading. So if you shorted, where did you say? 110,400. So you've shorted in that consolidation, or just as it fell out of the bottom of that consolidation. But again, if you're shorting, it depends on, like, a lot of this just depends on where your stop is. If you're shorting this based on 3-day supply, and that's just where you got in after it was showing a decent reaction down, then that's fine, because if you're taking 3-day supply and your stop is up here. I think part of the problem, what people are having in my group, is that they're doing these types of things, but then having a stop here. And, obviously this can take days doing this if it wants, before falling down to, where was your target? 103,500. So around there. It might fall down in one candle, but it might take days to do so. It does have some demand here. So it just depends how you're willing to manage your trade. For me, with your comment, Obina, on how I do things, I do not have the patience. So I have never been able to bear, and maybe if I get super rich one day, I'll be okay with this, but I have never been able to bear kind of going, let's say I entered there on a short, and let's say I had quite a wide stop, so this wick didn't stop me out. Let's say my stop was up here somewhere. What I've never been able to bear is going profit. Oh shit, it's coming back on me, it's coming back. Oh, now I'm in loss. And then I just get annoyed and I have to watch it the whole time and all that. So for me, it is much better just to close when I get to the most recent demand, or just move my stop to break even. And then if it takes me out, I'll enter again later. So but again, it just depends what your preference is, whether you can handle drawdown. I'm not great at handling drawdown. And with trading, you've just got to figure out your own psychology. The biggest challenge for most people is fighting whatever their psychology is. A lot of people, it's FOMO. For me, it's not. I'm very good with FOMO. I've learned to be. I don't get FOMO. Like if I'm not in a trade, so like that example I gave on take, if I'm not in this, I won't even try. I might actually, clarify that. If it gives me some structure like this to then try later, then yes, I would try. But in this, I don't just FOMO, because I've learned my lesson on that, where I've kind of FOMO'd and then literally, been on the receiving end of, trying to FOMO in here. My mouse not working. Trying to FOMO in here, and then a giant red candle just takes everybody out. So yeah, I've learned not to FOMO, but a lot of people, they have the FOMO issue. And then they see a chart like this and they think, well, I should have FOMO'd. Idle was similar, I think. So even Idle, yeah, yesterday, again, this is frustrating, but I can't really say that. I charted this yesterday when it was around here. And I didn't really mention it in the group because I kind of thought, you know, it's only had hourly demands. It didn't have normally I would wait for an 8 hour, and actually, in fact, normally 8 or 12 hours get given at all time highs from what I've seen a lot recently. I'll come back to your question in a minute, Oguna. But yeah, so normally if it gives an 8 and 12 hours, so I thought, okay, I'll come back to that later. And then obviously the next thing I know, it's suddenly topping the list of gainers and has moved up a ridiculous amount. You know, in this case, it had already come off that hourly. So even if I'd alerted the hourly, plus it was a bit wicky and choppy. But again, I don't get FOMO on these. Like, my issues are admitting I'm wrong. And this comes from being a science and mathematician person, like at school and university and stuff. I'm not used to being wrong, and I'm used to certainty. So 2 + 2 is 4. There is no question. There is no debate. If I do a test or an exam, or if I did, you know, I did a maths degree and all that, you know, it's like you're right or wrong. There really wasn't any in between. Sometimes there's a bit of in between with proofs, but that was more if they're being generous when you actually did something wrong, but you did the rest right. But yeah, so one of my biggest issues in trading has been dealing with probabilities. On top of that, like, I'll be open with all this. On top of that, I have a sort of family background of being expected to be right. You know, I was smart at school and all that kind of stuff. So it was considered, it was intolerable to be wrong. So I was told off if I got B's and C's, but I wasn't really praised for getting A's. So I have therefore a complete inability to celebrate my own success. It's actually something I've discussed with my family. And I really struggle with admitting that I've failed or that I'm wrong. So I'm having to, and I have had to, reframe a failure in trading as actually a success, because a failure in trading is taking your stop. Because one of the big things that I've done historically in gambling my entire life away is just not admitting I'm wrong. So, you know, let's say I shorted this here thinking, okay, it's going to swing fair all-time high. Then, you know, and then it starts going up, and then I think, well, you know, it's gone up this much, how much higher can it go? And then I move my stop, then I would add, then I would add, and then suddenly you're liquidated, and then obviously it does that, and you're furious. So yeah, and I've had terrible gambling problems that I've had to deal with, and, you know, I still go in waves. I'm still sometimes better than others. But I'm just also, the other thing is the sort of, and probably my analysis works against me in that perspective, because let's say, I'll find another example. Yeah, so let's say I'd shorted this one, right? And, you know, again, so like what we were talking about a minute ago, so it came down, it's put me in profit, but I was hoping, you know, my target was down here. I was hoping this was going to be, right, a big reversal, and we were going to maybe take out the bottom of the range. I'm just hypothesizing, but for whatever reason, I was expecting this to dump, and then it bounces on 3-day demand here. And there's a big wick, and then I'll ignore that. Or historically, this is what I've done. I would ignore that. I'll be like, oh, it's fine. We've got supply here. It's gonna reject again and go back down again. You know, then it rejects here, it consolidates here, eventually comes back. So I go, oh shit. So I move my stop. But what I'll also do, and like I said, when you have lots of zones, it's very hard. Is I'll then kind of go, okay, well, you know, we haven't taken out this high yet, so that's probably okay. So I'll hold on through this, and then I'll be okay. You know, then it'll come back below my entry again, and I'm like going, woohoo, winning. And in some cases, like, again, so initially I wouldn't even have got out here. Then my second stage of kind of learning, I did get better at then getting out here. But then I would still get frustrated, because sometimes, again, that would happen. Then you're annoyed because you're like, well, I wish I just waited, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, then in my worst times, you know, obviously I'm excited here because it's back in profit, great. I'll move my stop to here. I'll be firm. I'll be saying, right now, you know, if it comes back there, then I'm going to keep my stop, and it just stops me out. But no, then it comes back here, and I go, oh shit, okay, but we still have this high here. So I move my stop again. So my stop's up there. So, but the point is anyway here that I would then kind of go, okay, well, also we can still reject here. So, you know, even when it's giving me clear signs here that it's making, you know, it's still making higher lows, and probably at this point in time, I would probably have been able to draw various demands or whatever in here going, okay, it's consolidating, it's going higher. But then again, I would move my stop and I'll be like, you know, and if I hadn't gone in too hard, then I would go, okay, so I'll average up here. So I'll average again there. My average would be somewhere like here now, but then it just keeps going. And, you know, and I've lost massive amounts of money. So like, I don't do this most of the time. I do this only, I don't know, 2 to 5% of the time, or I did back at this is 3-4 years ago, 2 to 5% of the time I would do this, but that 2 to the 5% of the time I've lost 100% of my portfolio. So that's why you'll know, like, when anybody talks about risk, you know, and then I'm always like super strict and I'm saying, what's your risk? What's your risk to reward on the trade? You know, don't move your stop, don't move your stop, don't let yourself get liquidated. And, you know, it's like I tell my boyfriend, like people joke that I lecture my boyfriend about smoking and I refuse to let him smoke. And then I say, isn't that really hypocritical? And I'm like, I'm fully aware it's completely hypocritical, but I also know how bad it can be when you get addicted. So it's the same with trading. I'm like, I know how bad it can be when you start going, oh, I'm right. Oh no, I'll be right soon. And then the other thing is, the other worst part of the psychology is, you know, let's say it did fall from here, then I'm right, and I almost justify that I'm right, when really I was never right, because I entered here, and I just, you know, kept sticking with it until I eventually was right. So you can't say, you know, so I used to say, I'm right, but I was too early. But you're not right, you were too early, and that is wrong. And like I say, I've had to accept my psychology is that I'm wrong. So yeah, you need to figure out what yours is anyway. Is it similar to me? You know, is it fear of loss, fear, or, you know, inability to celebrate success and fear of failure? Or is it greed? Is it FOMO? Like, I tend not to be too greedy. Like, I get irritated when things like drop further when I've come out, but I can tolerate that. I can tolerate the FOMO. But what, like, I think a lot of people in crypto, it's FOMO. So yeah, just try and figure out what your thing is. So Abhinay, so you said, yeah, that's a wide stop. So eventually it takes my stop. That's a bigger loss, or even likely liquidation. Well, no. So what when we were talking about this example on Bitcoin when you said that, weren't we? So so it shouldn't be. The whole point is, and that's why, you know, when people talk about leverage and they say, oh, I've got 100 times leverage, it doesn't matter. You know, and in the group, you've seen like some of the group post, you know, 100% gain or something. Like, it really is utterly irrelevant what percentage. You know, I let people in the private group do it because, you know, we're all friends in there, but really it makes no difference. All I want to know is how much did you risk? Because, you know, so if you go in here, you can go in here with your stop here and have a $100 loss, let's say. You can put your stop here and still have a $100 loss. You're just going to have a smaller position. So it shouldn't make a difference if it, like with the wide stop, if it eventually takes my stop, it's not a bigger loss. It should be the same loss. Like, you should be going, where's my tool? That's short. That's the long, obviously. Way. You know, you should be going, that's my stop loss. This is 2.5%, but that is still the $100 or the 1% that you're willing to lose. If your stop is here, that's still the $100 you're willing to lose. But what you then obviously need to figure out is where your target is, and whether it's a trade worth taking. And that's why I say the DCA and the investment perspective is very, very different to the trading perspective, because obviously trading, you wouldn't want to have a stop all the way up here. Well, but again, I mean, it depends on the size of your portfolio. So I think, I mean, you look at some of the big influencers, you know, when I see like one guy, I follow Loma, you know, he talks about going in with a $500,000 position or whatever, you know, but he's still, you know, he'll lose, you know, 5,000 or whatever on the $500,000 position, but it's still only 1% for him for the size of his trade. So it's irrelevant, you know, and your leverage on top of that is irrelevant as well. Like, if you know, all leverage allows you to do is when you're taking the position size here. So if you want to lose $100 on that, if your position size is, it's more than 1%, if your stop loss is more than 1%, then I can't remember, I have to think about it a little more, but I think if your stop loss is more than 1%, then you would have to use like more than 1 times leverage to be able to allow yourself to take that position. But then if you wanted to take multiple positions, you should be just using leverage. Cross leverage, unfortunately, made it just so easy not to care. but so long as your stop loss is on the other side of your liquidation, it's irrelevant. And so long, but that should still only make you lose the 1% of your portfolio, or if you're very good at it, 2, 3, 5% if you want to risk a bit more. But strictly, you should be risking 1% per trade. You had an AI make you a chart to show RR and profitable. Yeah, I mean, I've got that like in my group. Let me see if I can bring it up. In my group, I have. I did the risk. See if I can open it quickly in my risk management document. So I wrote a whole risk management document. And again, so like I say, it's why I'm super strict on it, because I know I can just go and I just turn into a crazy person. Here we go. Come up on my streaming thing for some reason. So yeah, you've just really got to push this stuff into your head so if you take trades of 2R, 2 risk to reward, then you only need to win 33% of them to break even. And it's kind of remembering that, that these are the numbers associated, so that's the 2 and the 33%, but that you can win. So let's say down at this end of, or the 15 end, you only need to win 6% of your trades if the one you win is a 15 risk to reward, i.e. you risk $100 and you make $1,500. But people forget that. But the problem is you've also then got to deal with the psychology of having lost 14 trades before that to then get that one trade, the 15th. So you need to get a balance. Like I wouldn't recommend going at this upper end, try and stick somewhere kind of in the middle but realistically, if you take trades that are risk to reward of 4, you only need to win 20% to break even. So, and what's 20% of 4 is one trade. Sorry, I lost my train of thought slightly, but yeah, you get the general idea anyway. That, but you've still got, you've got to deal with the psychology of having lost the other trades. Sorry, that's 20%. Depends how many trades you're taking, obviously. So it's not necessarily as simple as this in real life, or maybe I'll put some here. So yeah, for 4R trades, you risk 100 to gain 400. You must only win 20% to break even. If you took 10 trades at 0.5R, you would need to win 7 or more to make profit. 7 trades would make $50 each, and 3 trades would lose $100 each, leaving you with 50 profit overall. In contrast, if you take 10 trades at 4R, you only need to win 3 to make profit. 3 trades would make $400 each, and 7 trades would lose $100 each, leaving you with $500 profit. But anyway, you can go to this if you go into my TA chat channel. You can take this and read it, see if you can understand that. Well, my connection is actually been quite nice now. Anyway, has that kind of answered all the questions on that? Feel free to follow up anything you want to follow up. But I think I've pretty much covered Bitcoin before anyway. And yeah, so on the lower time frame, like I said, there just wasn't anywhere here. Percent profitable and worst win-loss streak is good too, because it gives you the chances of total loss using X percent. Percent profitable and worst win-loss streak is good too, because it gives you the chances of total loss using X percent of your entire account. Not sure exactly what you mean with that. If you like how many you previously, you mean historical win-loss streak? To give you the chances of losing X percent of your entire account. Yeah. But I think, like what you would really want to be doing is doing this for like a month or 2 months. Like you should do a month and then journal it and see, and then you can ascertain what your win rate is and what your average risk to reward is, and then you can refine your strategy accordingly. And again, one of the bigger problems I think I've seen on in the groups is that most people aren't journaling, and most people have no idea like why they're losing. And that's a problem. Like you need to know. And I think, and again, so that's obviously psychologically challenging as well, because most people, when they lose, like walk away, or they say I'm having a break for a few days. For me, I've always been the complete opposite, and frankly, that's how I learned so much more. Like people say to me, "Oh, they lost one," and then just on to looking for the next one. The amount of time, again, if you guys don't know, like so, when I get like these are all my low time frame entries on Bitcoin, for those who don't follow me, but like so, let's say something like this. So I mean, that's it's a debate. You could argue that that's a loss and you could argue that that's a win. That for me is like whether it's a win from a trade perspective is a different question as to whether it's a win. For me, that's a win because it held a zone that I wanted to see a reaction at. Then I'm looking for, if it holds the zone, then I'm looking for what kind of reaction it gives. In this case, it didn't give a very strong reaction and eventually broke the zone. This one here, I remember this hitting and we had a lot of chat about it at the time, and I put a lot of comments in, like I'd had the alert in there because again, it may give a reaction like this. In this case, it did give us kind of reactions in the zone, but then wick through. But we talked, again, like you'll remember that I made a lot of comments at the time about the fact that if we were swing failing up here, we're taking the stops at the top of the range. This is the wave that created the top of the range, that it was a fair chance that we would take out the low here. Thus, this demand, what's telling you is this demand is weak. It's been unable to break the high significantly. It's just taken stops, and it probably should have rejected here. This is a fake move to take stops. So really, this is a structure of a lower high. That's what I consider a swing failure wick. But what it's telling you is this demand, this demand is not strong. So while I can put an alert there and say maybe we'll get a reaction, we talked about it at the time, in this case, again, get very little, then we got the swing fail entry. Then something like this, but what I'm doing, anyway, my point is I'm spending way more time figuring out why I'm wrong than why I'm right. If I'm right, I just move on. And this also partly comes back to probably some of my psychology of not being able to celebrate my success. That, I need you guys to kind of tell me like, yeah, you got a win from an alert that I've given or something, because for me, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm expected to be successful, but if I'm wrong, then I really, really want to know why I'm wrong. So I guess like while it's worked against me in trading, it's worked probably in my favor in analysis, because I then spend a huge amount of time going, why was that wrong? Why didn't that work? Why didn't this work? Why did it just pound straight through that level? And I'll spend a lot of time so I don't do that again. And again, like even you may remember, last week when I did all the analysis on CME, when I was, these are things, saying this would reject here rather than going up to fill the CME gap, which is what most people wanted. It's experience and history, and it's going back and it's spending time looking at the charts, looking at these structures, what do things look like when this happens before? So I go back and I go, okay, this happened before, what happened then? Like, it doesn't have to follow the same pattern. They say past PA is not indicative of future PA and all that sort of stuff. But structures and patterns and waves, like the strength, the buyers and sellers that does repeat. So, things like this, it's kind of, this is just history of having kind of gone in the past. I've seen this before. We're probably not going to fill that gap. Also, if you have higher RR, then you'll lose more often. Yeah, for sure. And like I say, again, you've got to fit with your psychology. So yeah, in a perfect world, we all take 10-hour trades, 20-hour trades, and we're quite happy when 60-70% of them stop out, even 50%. But it's not realistically, it's probably not the case. Like, most people aren't going to tolerate. I don't think I could tolerate 50 or 60% of my trades stopping out. I also can't tolerate them coming back on me. So for me, it is a much better strategy just to take profit often and quickly. And again, are you a trader or are you an investor? I don't want to sit here, and like people go, oh, the S&P goes up forever. But yeah, it's going up, I don't know what's the average, 8% a year on my pension or whatever it was. But I don't want 8% a year. I want 8% in, a week. And if those are your targets, then you're much more likely to get them with, lower time frame PA, but also just getting out quickly, in and out, if you're right. So that, this one up here that I showed you, this is still a 4-hour chart, so it still had a couple of days, or at least a day of going up here. But, just get out on the next supply. And yes, it's frustrating when you like on this one, if you get out like here, for example, and it goes further, but the chances of it going further are much lower than the chances of you just taking profit, or for me anyway, in the long run, I'm much better off going, okay, I've got the entry, I'm just going to get out as soon as it shows any sign of coming back on, or at the nearest trouble area, the nearest supply. For me, that's a much better plan than trying to go, okay, I've bought the bottom here and I'm going to hold it for a new high. But again, it's up to you. It's whatever fits with your psychology. But it's also why I historically, like I did the educational videos, when was it, earlier this year, But it was always why I historically was really reluctant to do that, because I think it makes such a difference what kind of a trader you are and what your psychology is. But yeah, so I think I've covered what Benny said. I've covered what you asked at least. But I'll try and do more things in the channel anyway of like how to enter, or at least more like in the same the stuff I did yesterday on, you know, what you're looking for when you're looking for a reversal. And as I said, you know, it's never easy, and there's always going to be situations like this where it just takes off without you, but you just have to, like I say, for me, without FOMO, it's easier to accept that. But what you always have to remember, and I think, you know, again, what's really good for me is, like, so this list is currently sorted. I need to have it sorted. This was sorted by the top gainers of yesterday. So obviously you can see idles kept going, M's kept going. Didn't come back for my re-entry there, that's annoying. But if you look at most of these charts, let me just resort this so you can see. But so I was looking at this yesterday. I mean, it's much the same today. So you can see here we've got 10%. I think this is sorted. Sometimes the sort doesn't fully work, but yeah. So from a day perspective, we have 9% RDO. So what's this, like 10 or 12 coins today of my list, which is 800, I believe. Let me check. Look at this, 719. Of 719 charts, yeah, sure, I'll have a look at Fartcoin. 719 charts, only 10 of them have a higher than 10% increase today. If I look at the bottom section, sorry. Okay, we'll see prices are going down today. So there's maybe 20 or 30 there with a less than 10% increase. Oh, sorry, a loss at less than 10% loss today. So again, if you're hoping for the big moves, the chances of you getting them are really, really small unless you're some kind of genius. And if you figure that out, please let me know, because I would love to know. I'd love to be able to pick the ones that are going to do this when everything else is still doing this. But I think it's very, very hard to do that. And I also think we're not really in a market like, so M and Idle, like I said, have continued, but the other ones that pumped yesterday are now starting to come back down again. So, yes, I'll have a look at Fartcoin. Did you buy Fartcoin? Because I think you were talking about that, weren't you? Yesterday, day before. Mean reversion is only time you're a profitable trader, but I'm trying to be more averse to differing market conditions. Yeah, I'm better at mean reversion, I guess, which is also why I'm better at shorting, because yeah, I find it much easier to short pumps back down again than to jump into anything later. But for me, I think mean reversion. So yeah, I've said before. So what I do is, if you're new rules crypto, I sort my watch list by the top and bottom, and at the end and towards the end of each day, and then I chart all of those at the top and the bottom to see if they're coming into demand or going up into supply, or if they're at all-time highs. In some cases, I'll look to try and jump in later. So I'm trying to. So I think ZORA might have been one of them as an example. Yeah, so like here, so this, but obviously consolidated, broke out, so we did get along in that daily demand there. Then obviously it fell to short, and then obviously it was really pushing. The black cross is when it hit whatever the previous all-time high was. And then in a case like this, then like I said, I tend to use 8 and 12 hour demand because I think they're the most reliable. So again, you get a long entry off there. This was then beyond daily, and you know, you can try and jump in here, but again, like I say, I'm not great at these, although it did give me an hourly chart there. So let's go up to the 8 hour. Yeah, so a nice entry off an 8 hour there. So again, these are the clean ones, and the ones, you know, if it's going to have momentum and push up, that's going to be it. Same here on daily demand, then here on the weekly. Then I started thinking, okay, the market's going to reverse. You start looking for shorts. But the volatility when you have a top like this, or when you have a top, are probably what I most like trading in both directions. Now, obviously, you've got to look at, and also because I find the analysis fascinating. I'm like, is this reversing? Isn't it reversing? So, yeah, I find that kind of super interesting. What else? What was I saying? Oh yeah, so the different things to trade. I don't think there's anything, if you're doing mean reversion, I think there's nothing wrong with doing that in any market conditions, because and if you're assuming you're in crypto, not FX, because there's always some random outlier that's doing something crazy. So if you want to short that back down again or long that when it's, I mean, it's longing when from the bottom is harder. Shorting back down, I think, is much easier because the longs, some can just die forever. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with just having one strategy. I don't think you need to make a new strategy unless, you know, you're not finding trades for some reason in those situations. But then can't you just have a day off? If that's what you're good at, stick to what you're good at. And that's why I say for me, like, I'm much better at shorting. So if it's a bull market, you'll tend to find I go quiet because I'm sitting there setting alerts, you know, for things to come back. But like, let's say in Fartcoin, you know, but if, you know, if I set an alert here for a retest here and it doesn't come back here, then I'm just not in the trade. So I'll be setting alerts for all the demands, but if things are pumping, well, this is a 2-day chart, but if, you know, things are getting days and days of up, you know, when things aren't coming back for tests, you know, what I'm doing is waiting for them to come back for my entries. And if they don't, they don't. But for some reason, like I said, I'm much better at putting aggressive shorts in. Multiple shorts on Fartcoin, like in here, as I think an 8-hour supply. That was too aggressive, and then went up into another 8-hour supply, then 4-hour supply here, because it made a monthly supply. So, I think you've probably seen my previous analysis on Fartcoin anyway. So, the challenge with Fartcoin is, like the drawings, we have a weak 2-month demand in here. This giant red area, so obviously it can go all the way down, and it's not a good demand anyway. It's not particularly one that I want to trade now. I think we traded long on the first bounce off it. So we've got a 2-month demand in there, but we've got a monthly supply that's rejected above. So this is just a structure I don't particularly like. From a higher time frame perspective, so I've got an alert down here on what's that, weekly demand? Is that a 2-week down there as well? No. So I've got a weekly demand alert down here. So I'm trying to see the reaction there. Even that's possibly too aggressive. The 61 fib's a bit lower. The 61, we're now at the 61 on the linear scale actually, so we could get a bounce from now, but on the log scale the 61's a bit lower. So again, I don't trade 61 fibs in isolation. So even though this is a 61 fib now on the linear, I don't know if I'd really like to trade that. So we've gone through, what have we got? Lower time frames. So we've got a daily demand. So there's still the chance it's going to hold here, so you can keep an eye on it. Like, this is basically, so this is the zone that is holding up this whole consolidation on top. Let me look at the log scale, because that makes it nicer. So this is the zone that's holding up this whole consolidation. So if it does hold here, then fine, you can start looking for longs. However, I would not do that yet. So this is similar to what I said at the start about what Bitcoin is looking like, and also what most of the majors are looking like. That just delete that. If we go to, so we've already said we've got the monthly supply up here, which we've already rejected off. So arguably that monthly supply is played out. We've now getting at the moment a strong red candle. It's a 3-week chart, so it's got 10 days till this closes, but at the moment this isn't looking great on the 3-week. We've got a 2-week supply in there, and I think I added a new alert on that. Yeah, so I've got a new alert on that 2-week supply there. It's not an ideal one. I don't know if I love that zone for a short, but again, we'll see. But also that's obviously a fairly poor 2-week close. So really for this, you know, like, based on exactly how we trade in the channel, we trade in demand and we trade in supply. This is not a case in the bigger 2 months. So if you want to be an investor in DCA all the way down to the bottom, feel free. But from a trading perspective, this is not a zone where I want to trade. But you can see, so we've got the 2-week is also a weekly supply. We've got a 5-day in there. This is just indicative of how a lot of the majors are looking, because we've had this slow grind down. We've got a 4-day, and then we've got multiple 3 days looking much more like Bitcoin here. Now, the problem I've had, and what I've said with the majors, is, you know, there were signs that we might have all season based on some of the other charts. I was going to cover that a bit today, but it's getting really late now, so I won't. But obviously we've got trend line stops here. So there is a chance that this is just going to run through everything up there. You know, I leave the alert there. There's an hourly here that I previously had alerted. I may or may not put that in if it comes to it. And then obviously a daily up here that hasn't been tested. So it's just, again, it's looking at zones as and when they hit. This zone isn't ideal because of the possibility of taking the stops above here and just throwing a giant green candle if it wants to. However, at the moment, it just kind of looks like it's running off a cliff. So what I'm looking for, and I think you asked me this yesterday, I've been on the one, I don't know, whichever chart I posted on how to trade, on how you trade the trend line. What I'm looking for is, again, this is more of a steep trend line here. I'll just follow that trend line. That's a bit of a trend line there. Get rid of that. Trend lines I find very hard to trade, and even I said that Shy normally trades them, and then I said, "What's it? I don't know where his win rate is," and he replies 0. So I don't think trend lines are easy to trade. I think they're easy to trade if we're in a bull alt market. Then you can, and we did have one instance, I think, in the last year or so, in the last 6 months, where everything had trend line stops and everything then went and took them out. But I think it's in a bull market, then fine, you can trade whatever and it will go up. But in a market like this, I think it's much more risky. So what I'd be looking for on something like this is, again, what's the immediate supply? So this daily or this whole 3-day, and I'm looking for those to flip to demand. So if we get a big green candle, which then flips those to demand, then great. That is going to come straight up into the 2-week supply there. So you'll have that risk, but if we do then have new demand there or here, sort of that supply flips to demand, then you can start looking for, is that uptrend going to happen? I would not want to preempt this. Like, I wouldn't particularly want to buy here in the hope, unless we are on a decent zone here. And this is tenuous. Like, if you call that the first test, it's essentially the second test of it. But if this whole thing was sitting on like, a weekly zone or a monthly zone or something like that, then I'd be more inclined to kind of go, okay, yes, I'm going to look for aggressive entries. But again, per the discussion we had at the start of this stream, we are in, okay, so downtrend, retrace down, retrace down, retrace down, retrace. So you would still really want it to break this, like I just said, and then you're looking for the entry and then potentially to get up to there and take out that high. If we take out that high, then you've got another potential long entry after that. But for now, this for me is not something. It's something I would potentially trade short. A bit risky because we're on this demand. I think there's other things that are better to trade than this at the moment, quite honestly. Anyway, we are 6:15. Any other questions? If you guys are still there, hopefully. Anyway, the other thing with this, so just be conscious that this. Looks familiar? Take orange off this actually. Actually, I don't know, maybe they're on the other. But yeah, do you see how this is looking quite familiar to Fartcoin? Retrace, rolling over. Obviously hasn't, I'm exaggerating with that, it hasn't gone that low. Obviously in this case it's coming back up again. But yeah, note the similarity there, and also here. This may not have all the history. It doesn't have all the history, hold on. Base. And this was also my bearishness on Solana. Excuse me. So again, that similarity where you've got that first big impulse, retest, struggles, and then in this case drops all the way down to the bottom there. So yeah, just the structures to be conscious of, and obviously Fartcoin to me doesn't look it looks like very, very similar to this right now. So I just don't know if we're going to run off a cliff. But obviously, Solana BTC isn't bounced up here. I don't really know why that's. I think SOLBTC is just a bit of a weird chart. I need to look at my other layout and then I can see what my actual drawings are on this. But yeah, this isn't a zone I really expected to bounce. I think there's a monthly. I think there's monthly and 2 monthly down here. But again, can bounce just randomly. Maybe it's found some support on a lower time frame in here. I don't know. But again, like people say to me, so when I talk about so let's use this as an example, I want to long here, or I want to short here, or like I just said on Fartcoin, it doesn't mean it has to get there, because people will start going, if I said, somebody said, where do you want to long SOLBTC? And I said down here, people are like, you're so bearish. But my intention is not to be bearish. My intention is to take trades that are high probability. For me, it can bounce here and go up here, but this was not a high probability entry. Maybe it'll give something that's afterwards, that's fine, but when I say I want to buy here, it doesn't mean I think it's going here. And in fact, in the case of ETHBTC, that's where I wanted to buy, and it went straight through it and took out the lows. But also, again, like it's what I always say, that I can want to buy in here, but note this is a lower high. So this, as I always say, demand is weak, has not taken out these sellers. So I can want to buy in here and think it's going to get some sort of a bounce, but it's still weak demand. It could run straight through it, which is what was proven on ETHBTC. My other issue with Fartcoin is things like this. Here's my mess and lots of entries on this. Again, similar structure. So we had a pump, and then, you know, it hasn't gone back. You know, everybody was like, buy SHIB all down here, that's fine, but it hasn't gone up and taken the high. And again, you'll see people, crypto Twitter is wonderful at going like that. And, you know, it might do that in the bigger picture. And again, it's a might, but in this case, it had annual supply. So I was like super aggressively looking for shorts on this when we were in here, and had a really nice reaction down. And at this point, you know, with an annual supply, I still expect this to take out the low. That would be the structure when you're coming off an annual supply. So it might take 5 years to do that, 10 years to do that, but that to me is higher probability. So yes, I've got an alert here. I've had alerts here for longs. You know, we can look for those bounces. If it then doesn't have supply, or if it's already tested supply, which in this case maybe it has, maybe when you get this bounce, then it's going to run through things and run back higher. But it needs to find support on this demand, which at the moment is weak because it has been unable to break this annual supply. So yeah, my concern when people get super bullish on things like Fartcoin is things like this. You know, in contrast, you know, it doesn't always have to do that. I think PEPE, just looking at sort of shitty meme columns. This is a monthly chart, so but PEPE, you know, obviously has this pump, it hasn't retraced back down to the start of it like Fartcoin and SHIB did, you know, so this has managed to hold. I still think this isn't looking great though either. You know, it's up here, it's only 3 hits to the high, and it's on a much higher time frame, but this is still potentially a B wave for that to happen. So that concerns me there. So not to say Fartcoin isn't going to go up. Fartcoin does have that 2-month demand. BONK, I think, was another. Maybe I've got 1,000 BONK. So I haven't got to scroll through my very long 700 coin list. BONK also has held, hasn't come all the way back down. But in the case of Fartcoin, so it did. So Fartcoin mainly, it looked more similar to the SHIB structure early on. But I had a look at these because I really wanted to see. This is actually very like PEPE, isn't it? Again, 3 hits to the high, and it's kind of doing then this is what I've talked about many times on the others chart, you know, as to whether we are in a B wave scenario. Again, if any of you guys follow me, you would have seen this many times, that whether we're in like a higher time frame. So this, okay, the left looks different, but you can see this is very similar to the PEPE and BONK charts without that section over this section of it to some extent. That it's got, you know, actually they had 3 hits to the high, I think, is those hits, and then now it's just grinding up here. And, you know, is it possible that this grind ends up in a pump? Yes, it's possible, but really this to me is a grind for that. And potentially down into here. I still think that is the higher probability here. The counter that, the bullish thesis, is that we did make 3-week demand and monthly demand on this. So I'm still just zones as and when they hit, but from a bigger picture structure sort of thing, if you look at this, this is, you know, that's a nice impulse. This is very corrective. It's like retracing back into the range. You know, it's not a strong move up. So I guess we shall see. You know, I mean, having said that, you know, here we had a stronger move up, and then it was very sideways before the COVID dump, and then did run. So it can run from these types of scenarios. But yeah, I find this like it's looking now. Early days on a lot of these market cap charts looked a lot more like crypto, whereas now things look a bit more like TradFi. More sort of obviously they've got more history and less liquid. I was going to say more liquidity, but actually probably less liquidity, more or less liquidity, but probably more liquidity across the whole chart, but obviously less on because there's so many individual coins. But they're pulling more cleaner structures than they have done previously when we just had excessive bull runs. But this is back to the argument as to whether you think this time is different or the same. I would love to see this do a big green candle up. And I did have some hope on this, and like I said, I have to go in a moment, but like I'm still kind of clinging to a thread of hope that this is going to give us all season. Like again, we made a 3-week demand in here, which hasn't quite tested, and is struggling to get out. Like I had this triangle from I think a couple of weekends ago, but it's obviously struggling. But this is very hard. It could resolve either way, and as we saw with take, it can resolve in a giant green candle, but it can also resolve in a giant red candle. So what I'm trying to do is just watch for alts to see if we start. Obviously, this will move only when alts move anyway. Obviously, if dominance is going to increase. So what we need to do is see, are we going to get a few alts start to move, and actually get a decent green candle on this, and then we need to get the alts that are later if we're going to get that bull run. Similarly on total E100, like we had this descending triangle, which is trying to push out of possible double bottom. So I guess we'll see, but there's still some hope for all season. The difficulty is TOTALDEFI, I think, has already had its day. So I've kind of said in the group already, I'm not really looking at Ether or DeFi at the moment, because I think TOTALDEFI is in 2 months supply. So for me, it's just not a buy. Maybe you're going to get an individual chart that's a buy, but we'll see. Ether dominance has hit 6 months supply. So for me, it's not a buy. Even if it goes higher, I'm not interested in this for longs. And BTC dominance obviously has dropped a lot already, so maybe BTC is going to pick up. But the risk we have now, because I think in this time, this is the period when we had alt season, the end of last year, or was it over by then? Can't remember exactly when alt season was. Was it this section? So if it was this section, then we potentially already had alt season. Maybe it's going to keep going further. It's possible. But all we get the balance. I need to have a look at it again. I can't remember what exactly the market was doing at that point in time. But like I say, so I do see there's still some hope on others, but it's really been very slow, and I'm not really liking how long it's taking. And ultimately, I did want lower on this. So, and yeah. So again, all my things. Last one on pump. Okay, sure. Yeah, all the. I was going to say, so I lost my train of thought again. That's not interesting. Damn, did you front run me again? That's so annoying. So yeah, had an alert there on 3-day demand, and it's front run me. It's very annoying. This is so hard. There's so little history. I don't really know. So 2 weeks, still a while till that. Oops. Still a while till the 2-week closes. Well, it'd be nice if it makes a weekly demand in here, then we can probably be more confident. Are you in this already, Abhinav, or are you just trying to find an entry? We're in a little bit of no man's land on some of the alts at the moment. Actually, it has made a 3-day in there. So this is a little difficult. So we've got a 3-day. So I'm going to move that alert up. So I don't love that this hasn't tested here. But I am looking at MEXC, so I wonder if it's tested on something else by a bit. No, also not. 2-day, daily. I'm toying, so I'm thinking about it like, should I move the alert up onto the top of this 3-day? So what I want to see here is this break, firstly. Because if this rejects here, and then here, second time here, then again, what it's telling me is this isn't strong demand. If it rejects here now, if this is the top, and this is a swing failure of that, then I expect it to take out those lows at least, if not here and here. So what I would say with this is just keep an eye on it. If this pushes from here higher, then you can potentially look for longs on a retest of that 3-day. If it rejects here, then I probably wouldn't look at it until it gets to that zone. And even then, it's a bit tenuous because we're looking at that as the range. And if it just has rejected here, it could just come down back down to the bottom of the range. Lower time frames. Once that happens, so when I put the alerts in the channel, like, I mean, and I say they're aggressive, which I think one of the guys asked me about the other day, like what aggressive means. So when I say aggressive, so something like this, you can try and trade this 12-hour if you want. That is what I would consider aggressive. In this case, I wouldn't alert this. I would say firstly, so that's your aggressive entry if you want to get in on this 12-hour. If you think that this has the balls or the legs to make it over this supply here. But yeah, I would say just watch it coming into this zone, but wait, I think it's a bit bold. It would be too bold to blindly just limit order in here because of like I say, it's still under supply and we've still got this possible swing fair of this high. So here to trade here is very aggressive. Possible, but very aggressive. But you can watch if it comes into here, just watch the 15-minute, 30-minute hourly and see if it starts to bounce. At least it is a defined stop, assuming you don't mess with your stop and start moving it down per the gambling conversation we had earlier in this stream. And yeah, then failing that, there's a 3-day here, and then there's a 3-day here. What I would like to see is because it left those equal lows there and didn't quite tap into this zone, I would quite like to see it come back down into that zone. Whether it will, I don't know. That's the challenging part. So, because if you look back over here, you can see that probably has had a weekly or something in there that this has tested. It's gone up and made a new high. And then here, obviously this is, again, as I explained before, this is a downtrend. So this was the short entry, and trading here for a long is risky. It's very early and there's very little PA on this. So, but in this case, it has come back down, hasn't broken that low. So this demand is possible, decent. So we're in a kind of mini uptrend here, but we really want this supply to break. We want the price up somewhere in here to be more confident of looking for longs in this area. I hope that makes sense. But so basically there's the aggressive entry on 12-hour demand in here. There's less aggressive on 3-day, then there's the bigger 3-day taking out the stops below. So it's entirely up to you. For me, so how I trade, those are 3 separate trades of different probabilities and risk. This one is probably the hardest one because this one, if you were to trade the 3-day, then you'd have your stop under the 3-day. And then obviously it's going to come right into where we expect potentially there to be a stop hunt. So if you trade that one, be careful. But in all cases, obviously, this is still very new and it could still be that bear flag and drop. Obviously, keep an eye on what Bitcoin's doing. So I wouldn't be blindly trying to long this at every bounce. But this certainly could give you a scalp. Any of these could give you a scalp. But if you want to be safe. So the safest entry is when you're looking at stuff like this, the safest entry is back down at the start of the impulse. So you're getting the higher low. If there's any demand in here, it looks like there might be an 8-hour in there, then that's your safest entry. However, if the market's very bullish, God, that alert's annoying. If the market's very bullish, then, maybe we're still in this immediate uptrend. It is in its favor. It is the second test here, so it is possible that can take it higher. I hope that helps to some extent. Right, that's all. Like I didn't cover any of the majors or anything like that. But I think also, to be honest, there's not a great deal more to say. Everything's pretty much as I've said previously. We're still waiting for zones to hit. The only thing I haven't really covered was Ether. So just a quick final on Ether. Like I say, I haven't changed anything. So I had an alert for a short, which I just showed earlier, that was just above that last high and then potentially up if it gets a retest up here. Similar to BTC, the CME gap is obviously right at the top here. So this is still also in an uptrend. Obviously, like if it breaks this low, then it's no longer in an uptrend. But even here, this is just a consolidation, and I don't like, I'd really like to see this hold that red box that I've got drawn in there, scribbled over, but this red box here. So now it's, it's had a swing fail through it. Like if this is bullish, then I would expect it to run from here And the fact it's not kind of makes me not like it very much. But there is the possibility. So you can look for a swing fail onto these lows into 4,200. That was like my next low time frame possible entry on Ether. Oh, and Ripple, you asked about Ripple, didn't you? Ripple, what was your name? Ripple guy. XRP guy, but I've forgotten. I don't know if you're still here. But yeah, anyway, you can watch for a swing fail at 4,200. Like we're given, we've got. Actually, be careful. Tomorrow's an FP, so I think. Well, yeah, I was going to say we're going into the weekend, but we have another day. And then here, I'm possibly being too conservative down there, but you can look from here because the 61 fib is higher. For some reason, I keep looking at that and then not changing it, so I'm not sure why. But yeah, 6,900 would be where you'd start to look for longs. I think Ether is inclined to wick when it does dump, so. But, you know, it is at the 61 fib up here, so maybe it would hold on the top of that zone. But those are the next entries I'll be looking at on Ether, locally under that low there, and then deeper if it drops down to there. And XRP, just in case the XRP guy comes back. So yeah, much like I said with all the other majors, so like if you haven't followed me before, because I think you said you're a new XRP guy, where is my little pattern? Well, I can't delete it. Then the brush. So this is me being a little bit facetious, but hold on. So again, if you haven't followed me, so you'll know, like, if you haven't followed me, you won't know. Ripple, I call this the Ripple pattern, where it makes a triangle, it goes up, it distributes, and then runs through the triangle. So we had that happen over here. That was really, really nicely played out, which we predicted at the time. What I have commented is that we also have this possibility now, that we have this triangle again, larger triangle, and that potentially we do the same thing. Having said that, I guess now, and the other thing I was just joking about, just before I finished that off, was the big picture. I then just kind of joked that maybe we get that with the giant triangle and the breakdown. Anyway, that's just me being facetious. We shall see. The only thing I would say on this, that while I sort of like this, that this is now kind of looking like this Ripple pattern. So I wonder now if we are going to get like this. It's not really a triangle, that's the only thing. It's more of a falling wedge, but I don't know. Does it have to be a triangle? I don't know, but I wonder if we're going to get that now. It's kind of the other possibility there. But again, for that to be like more confident, I want to see that move. So I would want to see some strong move off this low, like holding this zone, or possibly a wick below that orange line, but that's to the extent of it. And then a strong move off it, and then that consolidation for them, much like what we see here. Hopefully it will get given. But yeah, other than that, I don't really want to look for longs on this. But so same as what I've said for all the majors. What was that I just charted a minute ago? Fartcoin was the same. So, you know, we've got 2 weeks supply on this now. There's a whole bunch of 4 days and 5 days and 3 days and mess through here. So all the majors I put alerts on. I posted all the alerted zones in my Telegram channel. So if you want to go, if you're not on Telegram, go and have a look at those. So the only 2 that have hit, like, and I said some are more aggressive and some are less aggressive, but in fact, I haven't had anything that really isn't that aggressive. Sorry, doesn't make sense. Nothing was really aggressive enough. The only 2 that hit were the 2 that outperformed, which was BCH. So BCH, I've had this alert for a while. I had it as black because of the fact it was coming off 2-week demand, and I was a bit tentative. I think it's kind of taken out the 12-hour zone, but it's still kind of a lower high from that level. So could still play out from here. All the other majors just really didn't get that far. So even where I thought I was being more aggressive, like Ripple isn't that much higher up, I think 4 or 5 day supply. Same with LTC. None of them that have got even close. So then the other majors, it didn't have anything on BNB because the structure's too bullish. ADA was higher, DOGE was higher, Link was higher. Link and BNB both are at 6 month supply. I think maybe DOGE as well. ADA and Sol with the BTC pairs, I think, were the 2 that I thought maybe are okay. But yeah, so all you can see, all the levels are higher on these. Same with DOT. Atom, I didn't have anything locally. Actually, I stuck with previous just because it's already tested all the zones in there. all of those were higher, and then Sol's the only other one. So Sol and BCH and Sol work quite nicely, but they're the only two that have hit. And they're also, in fact, the only two that I put new longs on. So on those, Sol, watch this 8 hour coming back in here. It's still risky because it hasn't made a higher high, and obviously come down quite hard off that. However, obviously still in an upward structure and still potentially a sideways. So I wonder if this could run further. The other reason I'm being more open on this is it's in a big 2 monthly supply, but it's only in a 2-day inside it, and it's hit it multiple times. So I'm just wondering, yes, it's still in the large 2 month zone, but maybe it could push higher inside it. Sol very much looks similar to others though, with that possible bear flag. So I need to put some trend lines on that and have another look at it. And then same with BCH. So BCH made a new 3-day demand down here, daily and 3-day demand. So I have added long alerts on that. Other than that, there's nothing new. And if you want to view all the alerted zones, then you can go and have a look at the charts in my Telegram channel. Did I put it in the channel or the chat? I think I put it in the channel. So in the announcement channel. Anyway, it is now getting late and I have to meet somebody in less than an hour and take a shower. So I hope that's useful. And any other questions and queries? Maybe I'll try and do another stream tomorrow when we have NFP and see what that does to the market and see where we're at right before that. And oh yeah, I guess the only other, because the real consideration for NFP is going to be what the indices do. So I again had short alerts on the US indices just to see. So S&P, Dow and NASDAQ have all hit the short alerts, but they're all still on 2 weekly demands. So these were still tentative short alerts. So anyone who's not in my FX channel, the crypto alerts are for the private group, but the FX alerts are free. So you can go and get, so basically every time a trading view alert goes off, it goes into my FX channel, which is public on Telegram, and also onto my Twitter. So you can then go and kind of look at these. The indices are the least reliable, but when they do work, they work really well, but they are lower probability of working than anything else because I'm not on top of the charts enough. So you very much need to look at the lower time frames on that. But the normal, what do you call them? The traditional pairs, or just the currency pairs, should I say, are kind of more reliable normally for entries. August hasn't been great, though, I have to say. But anyway, yeah, so it's going to be interesting what NFP does tomorrow, and it's probably not ideal that the indices are pushing up today with NFP tomorrow because that might dump them. So we do need to be a little bit careful. I mean, the BTC isn't really following TradFi today, but if TradFi makes big moves, then it potentially does. It's more likely to on the big moves. So just be careful of that when we come in tomorrow. And the dollar's really consolidating. The dollar is coming off annual demand, so I am kind of like macro bullish on the dollar. I just don't know if it's going to go deeper in the zone first, but at the moment it's going to be awkwardly going sideways, and then we'll just have to see because NFP is probably going to break this out one way or the other. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I hope that was useful, more educational than normal, less of my usual faff, and really nice to have you guys on talking to me. So I am going to sign off now. And I hope everybody has a good evening. Ciao.